Mark's watching from Making the Cut. I am with Duane Simpkins, assistant coach at George Mason. How you doing, Coach Simpkins?
I'm doing well. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. With all the COVID-19 going on and, the restrictions being put in, how are you managing the recruiting process, and just how are the players who are currently in the program, how they're kind of staying in shape and doing basketball activities?
Well, first for our present players, our strength and conditioning coach, Hanny Hanran, has done a phenomenal job. He always does it when they're in person. But once we knew that we were going to be away from our guys for a prolonged period of time, Hanny put together a workout program for those guys for like a 6-week period. And then now he think he just set on another 8-week program. We were able to send out some things to help supplement their workouts, resistance bands, I think kettlebells, pull-up bars, things like that. But before that, it was pretty much, hey, we call them jailhouse workouts, where you're doing a lot of the workouts, lifting your own body weight, push-ups, lunges, squats, and obviously doing some sprinting and running and everything. So we're doing as much as we can with our guys with what we have, not being able to see them in person every day. And then obviously he checks in on those guys on a regular basis, a couple times a week, how their workouts are going, talking to them, texting with them and everything. So that's what we're doing with our present guys. As it relates to recruits, obviously this is a different time, right? And then normally we could get together with, prospects and their families or coaches in person, have them come to campus and things like that. So what we're doing now is pretty much like everybody's doing, man. We're making much more use of the technology that we actually have at our disposal, using Zoom and WebEx and things like that. We'll do recruiting presentations via Zoom, in addition to obviously speaking with them on the phone and doing FaceTime and things like that.
So recruiting in the DC area, in the DMV as a whole, is one of the most fertile areas for college basketball. So it seems like with all the local schools, there's always some undue pressure put on of, oh, how did this kid leave the area and stuff? But you have 3 kids that was currently on the roster last year that has ties to the Washington DC area. Just how important is it to the program to kind of find a way to keep these guys home? And what are some of the challenges? Because every kid does not want to stay home to play college
Right.
basketball.
No, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Coming from the University of Maryland myself, I stay in contact with, alum and people like, hey, man, how come we can't get more guys to stay home and everything? And like you said, everybody doesn't want to stay home. I know of a DeMatha kid who's doing really well where he is now. Like, Maryland recruited him. They did a hell of a job recruiting him. He liked it, but at the end of the day, he said, I don't want to go to school home. So you're going to have a certain segment of that student athlete population that are prospects that don't want to stay close to home. Now, of the ones that are open to it, obviously we can't get all of them. We can't recruit all of them. And the other thing is, in terms of roster management, I think a lot of times from the outside looking in, people just say, hey, that kid's good. You guys should recruit him. Well, if he's a point guard and we've got a freshman point guard and a sophomore point guard who are averaging 25, 30 minutes a game, that recruiting that kid to come in the next year, 1 year separating him and the freshman, the present freshman, may not be an ideal situation. So you got to look at the way that your roster is constructed, and also be realistic, because you can't go into a kid's living room and with his family and say, hey, we see you coming in and playing a lot next year, and that's not the reality. And then obviously, we're Coach Paulson is very old school when it comes to recruiting and everything. Some kids they want to get offered as soon as they possibly can as freshmen, sophomores. Coach Paulson does a really thorough and diligent job in terms of developing a relationship with the prospect and his family. He likes to see him in person once, twice, 3 times. He wants to talk to him on the phone and really get a chance to know him before, quote unquote, making an offer. And the thing that's a little bit different about us is, if we offer you, it's not something that we take lightly. If we made an offer to you on Tuesday and you're a junior, and on Thursday you call back and say, hey, coach, I want to come, we're going to take that offer. I know for a fact that in our industry, some kids get offered as freshmen, sophomores, juniors, or whatever. And, if a kid say, hey, coach, I want to take you up on that offer next week, well, they kind of backtrack and say, hey, we weren't expecting you to take the offer. We want to throw it out there so that you know that we're serious about you. So that's something that we do a little bit differently. And sometimes it can help us, sometimes it hurts us from the standpoint of some kids who say, hey, well, coach, you guys didn't offer me when you first saw me. You said you really liked me, and it took you guys 6 months to offer me. Well, you know what? That kid's probably not for us in our program.
Yeah, so just two of your kids, Jordan Miller and Joshua Duro, they've made incredible strides, to me, big strides in the short time they've been there. Talk a little bit about development and how high school coaches and even somewhat middle school coaches can help as far as preparing players for the college level who have been identified to be able to play college. Because it does seem like I was a high school basketball coach. So I see this gap between what's being taught on the high school level and kind of what's the expectations on the college level.
Yeah, one of the things that people have to realize, I was fortunate enough to be a high school player, and at DeMatha High School, I was a McDonald's All-American. Got recruited from Duke and Miami and Providence and wherever else, and I was a very good ball player. And by the time I got to Maryland, my skill level was as good as the guy who started in front of me as my freshman year. He was a senior, but he was 205, 210 pounds. I was 160, and my physicality and my toughness and the adaptive that learning curve that I had to adapt of the speed of the game and the physicality. Yeah, I was as skilled as he was, but in terms of experience and just overall strength, he was 3, 4 steps ahead of me. That is the same thing when you talk about kids making the transition from high school to college. I don't care how good you are, there's going to be a learning curve. The game is much faster. It's much more physical. And I don't care what level it is, whether you're going to a quote unquote low major, mid major, high major, there is a learning curve. And I think what happens, what high school coaches, the point to your question, what they can do to supplement that is put them in undue uh, tough situations on a consistent basis. In high school, you get a chance to kind of float around on defense. You might have one player on the opposing team, maybe two, that's really good. Everybody talks about the scoring. Well, you get in college, the difference between a guy who can actually get on the court sooner than later as a freshman or sophomore are the guys that actually can play defense. And not just individual defense, but team defense. There are different schemes that you have, how you defend ball screens. It's not just your on the ball defense, is where are you going to be when the ball goes here or here or here. A lot of kids, they haven't been taught that. So this is completely foreign to them once they do get into a college situation, and that game is going 1,000 miles an hour. Guys are bigger, more athletic, and you're telling them they have to play defense. Not everybody can do it.
No, that's understandable, and just more with the recruiting aspect of it. Now you are bringing in freshmen, but it seems like a big part of recruiting these days seems to be the transfer portal. I've never, and I'm probably around your age. I'm 50. I have never in college basketball seen so many transfers, not only at the high levels, but even at the small levels. And the point in the calendar where they're willing to put themselves in the portal. As a coach in recruiting, how do you mitigate that with how you bringing in freshmen along with kind of recruiting out of that portal also?
Yeah, like we talked about with the guys who are in high school right now, we're always honest with guys. We've never, in my 5 years that I've been here working with Coach Paulson, we've never promised anybody they're going to come in and start. We always tell them that there's an opportunity that's going to be there, depending on the consistency of the roster and their particular talent. We could tell them, hey, there's time. There's Javon Green, for instance, is going to graduate next year. Javon Green is averaging 32, 33 minutes a game. Well, that's a void, whether it's going to be absorbed by a kid who's an incoming freshman this year or the following year. So, we're able to identify that. But, for the most part, man, it's a different day and age. This is much different than, I'm 46. So you and I are the same boat in terms of age and generation and everything. This is completely different than when, we came up, watching some of the players that we watched and played against and everything. At the end of the day, though, I still think that it's still the big part is just developing a family like atmosphere where, yeah, everything's not always going to be peaches and cream. Everything's not going to be perfect, but even on your worst day, and I tell recruits this all the time when they come on campus for visits, even on your worst day, you have to envision yourself being here. When the coach is getting on you, your girlfriend dumped you, you flunked an exam. Do you still feel in your heart that you have people who are around you, your coaches, your players, your teammates that really care about you, no matter what's going on or off the court? And if you can check that box, probably got a pretty good place for you. But again, I think in this day and time, man, I think you have to be very specific in who you recruit. If you're recruiting a kid and you almost get the sense that, hey, I didn't get the offer from Kansas or Duke, but I'm going to settle for George Mason. That's not the kid you want in your program. You want a kid who's excited about being in your program. We've got a handful of kids who are coming in this year, recruiting class, and all four of those guys are excited about being George Mason Patriots. That's what you want.
As far as culture and the culture that George Mason has kind of developed, how do you sum that up to recruits of you're coming to Fairfax, Virginia, you're right outside the nation's capital. Here's what our program is about, and here's what our expectations are as a basketball player and as a student.
Yeah, we have some core values, just to talk about a couple of them, humility, focus, uh, talking, all those things are part of who we are, as a program. Um, we want our guys to be humble, to be gracious of the blessing that they have. They have a full scholarship, that in monetary terms, it's a high number, room, board, books, gear. You get a chance to travel all over the country. Um, every one of our guys in the 4-year period that they're here will get a chance to go travel internationally. So this is a tremendous blessing. And, we really try to impart that on our guys each and every single day. Um, that within itself, I think, lends us to have success with our guys in terms of uh, being quality student athletes at George Mason. And then we also hit on, like you said, our location is very unique. Being 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C., we always talk about this isn't necessarily a 4-year decision for you. This is a 40-year decision. The network that you develop here at George Mason will be with you for a lifetime. Being able to, we have a number of guys who are sports management majors. Some guys want to do anything from physical therapy. Some guys want to be coaches. Some guys want to do sports marketing. Some guys want to be agents or sports broadcasting. Well, you got it all right here in Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C., and that's a tremendous sell.
So, just as a coach, and it might not be the situation that you're in at George Mason, but it is something that has cropped up over the last 24 hours. When players get feedback going through the NBA process and the NBA says, well, you're lacking in X or Y skill, and you understand that in that program, um, you're not going to get that opportunity or you're not going to get it the way you want it. How does a coach deal with that? Because ultimately, you're coaching at George Mason University. You're coaching at a university, and that's going to conflict with sometimes with personal goals. Just how do you deal with that, and how do players need to understand that, yes, if you want to be in the NBA, we'd love to help you get there, but it can't be at the detriment of the program.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think I know the situation that you're speaking of, and it's a tough one because let's say I recruited you as a in high school you were a big time scoring guard, and I recruited you to be a big time scoring guard. You haven't necessarily played the point guard position, but you get here and you're scoring the basketball. We recruited you for this particular position, and you get some feedback from coach from the NBA saying, hey, well, if you make it to the NBA, you're going to have to be a point guard. Well, now you're gonna go back to school and say, Coach, I need the ball in my hands. I got to be a point guard. Well, that's not what we recruited you for. Like we were all on the same page when it came to that. That's a tough one. It really is a tough one, man. I really couldn't give you a definitive answer on that. I think there has to be some give and take. Obviously, as a coaching staff, you got to say, hey, what can we alter without completely changing who we are as a team and what we're doing? How can we still maximize the other players on our team while still pouring into that young man and developing his, in this specific case, his point guard skills and everything? Do we have more film study with him? Do we do certain drills with him? Do we, spend as opposed to him spending, 95% of his time off the ball. Can we incorporate him to 25% of the time having the ball? So it's got to be a little bit of give and take, I think.
Yeah. So when you look at the college game, as one Big East coach once told me, name another basketball organization that on the Final Four weekend can fill up a dome, right? But there's always talk about style of play and rule changes. Is there something with college basketball that maybe FIBA uses, or whatever the case may be, that if you're kind of in charge of it, that you would like to see change?
Um, I'd actually like to see the lengthening of the lane.
Mm.
I think that will create even more movement, spacing. Um, I really like some of the things that have been adapted, like such as getting an offensive rebound. The shot clock doesn't reset all the way back to 30. I think that's a good thing. Um, I would even like to see the game, the shot clock going to 24 seconds. If we say that we want to, everybody likes scoring, right? Everybody likes to see the flow of the game, and then if you also want to have it where you can honestly look at some of the elite players that are being looked upon as potential one and dones, or guys in 2 years that may go to the NBA. You want to say that, hey, we have a product that directly mirrors what it is that where you want to get to. And I played in the system, when I played over in Europe, and I played in the summer league for the Memphis Grizzlies. Like the 24-second shot clock versus a 30-second shot clock, people think it's only 6 seconds. It is a completely different. There's no jogging the ball up the court. You've got to get that ball to half court in 2.5 seconds. You got to get the ball entered into their offense. I think that will help speed up the game and make it could look ugly early on, but I think it'll force guys to learn how to play the game of basketball. But those are the two main things, man. Just the widening of the lane and that shot clock, I think.
What do you think is the NCAA's just kind of resistance to moving to a shot clock and even the quarter system? I know we played in the women's, but not in the men's. Why is it such a resistance to moving away from what we consider as traditional college basketball?
The only thing that I can think of, man, is like the NCAA has always been, for lack of a better term, slow to the party. We had no shot clock, then we had a 45-second shot clock, then we had a 30-second shot clock. We had the 3-point line. I think it was 19-9. Now it's back to the international range. So like they slowly adapt to changing things, but it's just slow. But I would not be surprised if in the next 2 years there's another adaptation to the rule or another implementation of the rule that mirrors whether the international FIBA play or the NBA.
You speak of the NCAA being slow. The players being able to capitalize off their likeness and make money away from the program. Like you said, the players are in a sense compensated in a way through their scholarship, but their ability to earn money off the floor away from the program. Are you comfortable with that? How do you feel about that?
Um, Somewhat comfortable because I would be the first one to say that, hey, these guys, student athletes, spend a tremendous amount of time. This is a full-time job for them. I was in those shoes before, and it's even more so now. The time demands on the student athletes between, everybody sees the guys playing and everything, but the practice time, the rehab, the prehab, the strength and conditioning programs, the meetings, all these things. There's a tremendous amount of demand on their time. Um, so I do not begrudge a student athlete receiving some kind of compensation. The model of which it should be done really needs to be looked upon. Because on the surface, people say, "Hey, just let the local car dealership be able to have Duane come down and do a 30-second spot on the radio, and we can pay him X amount of dollars." Okay, what is it capped at? What are going to be some of the rules that are going to be in place? It's not always going to be equitable. There are going to be certain, I don't care if it's a high major program, mid major, low major, there are going to be certain basketball towns that there's certain towns that are basketball centric towns. You can go down the list of some schools, whether it be in the A10 or the CAA, you know, all depending on where they are, they can do just as well as they would at a place like University of Maryland in terms of getting sponsorships and things like that. For the simple fact of that particular town, College Park is, in Maryland, there's a lot going on. Wizards, this and that, the hockey program, hockey team, number of different teams. But if you found a school that's tucked away in whether upstate New York or Southern Virginia, and it's basketball and all the time, a kid very well could do as good there as he could somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
Also, also, I wanted to talk to you about just in terms of your career. Period. We see the amount of players who are in the NCAA men's basketball system, and we just don't see that diversity in the leadership as head coaches with African Americans. Just what are some of the impediments where schools aren't as aggressive and as comfortable, seemingly hiring African Americans as head coaches?
That's a great question. I would say that it starts at the top. If there were more presidents, if there were more athletic directors that were people of color, I think you would see more people of color being hired in those head coaching positions. Let's call it what it is. Those people like to hire people that they're comfortable with, people that they feel would be able to connect with the key constituents on that particular campus. The boosters and the some of the people who will make big time decisions or have a voice in those decisions. And quite frankly, a lot of those people don't look like me or you. you
Yeah.
know, so an AD and a president, they want to be able to, obviously they want to be able to win basketball games and everything else. But at the end of the day, an AD's success is largely tied to a couple things. One, the success of, say, men's and women's basketball or men's basketball in the football program, and then how much money that they can raise. You got to feel comfortable with having a head coach that, you can put out on the podium. He's able to speak speak about the alignment of his vision for the program and the vision of the university. I think there's a number of people who are not comfortable with that, to be honest with you.
And it leads to the latest FBI investigation. It seemed like whenever punishment came out or faces were put on, it was always the African American assistant coach. And the head coach obviously had no clue what was going on behind it, or that's always the way it's sold. It just seems like African American coaches who are trying to pay the dues, do what you're supposed to do, get the experience, just sometimes are being put in positions that when the hammer drops, it's always their face that's in front of the camera.
Yeah, and that's one really unfortunate byproduct of this whole FBI investigation. The fact that the only people that were not of color involved in being that were locked up, was an Adidas representative. None of the coaches, So that was very disappointing. It was funny. I don't know if you got a chance to see the documentary, The Scheme, but it was really eye opening. Those guys, you can make the determination on your own whether they were quote unquote guilty or not. But from looking at that documentary, it's like, that could have been a number of coaches. Nobody had them on film taking money in their hand. You're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. I don't think that was the case with this particular situation. So it was really it was disheartening to see that. And again, this is, people can say what they want. This is still America in 2020. And no, sports does not shield you from everything that goes on in the real world.
When you're away from college basketball and just away from your job, how involved are you in basketball? Or when you're away from it, you truly want to be away from it?
Oh man, probably never, because I love coaching. I love the game of basketball. I've got two boys myself who are 16 and 12, and they both play. I go watch them in the AAU games and summer league, and One of them's is a freshman at DeMatha, so he's playing football and basketball. So I'm always in dad mode, but also in coach mode. But no, this is what I do, man. And I don't think in this profession you can't turn it off and say, "Hey, well, I'm not going to be a coach." No, if there's a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday or Monday, or it doesn't matter what day of the week or what time of the calendar year it is, like I've got to be on, and that's my responsibility. I'm fine with that.
Now, speaking of your career, when you're at the University of Maryland, what was that like? What was it like to play for Gary? Just how did that shape you in your future?
Oh man, it was a tremendous blessing. I didn't know it at the time that you don't look at your coach when you're coaching under him and you're playing under him like, hey, he's going to be a Hall of Fame coach and what have you. But just his attention to detail. Think the biggest thing that Gary brought to the table, man, like he made you play with a sense of urgency. You could see it. You see him on the sideline pacing and sweating through his jacket and everything. He was so on edge. He was so on, and you wanted to. And when we prepared hard. It just made me a better overall player. It made me a better coach in the long run as well because I was able to. I understand that there's a level of urgency that you have to have in order to be successful at the collegiate level. Um, and obviously, I came from DeMatha High School too. I've been blessed, man. I had two Hall of Fame coaches. Gary Williams from the University of Maryland and Coach Wooten at DeMatha.
Is there a particular moment or a particular game from your college career that still stands out to you?
Yeah, man, I tell this story sometimes when my freshman year, my very first road game, we're playing at West Virginia. And West Virginia is a rowdy place, man. That place is really exciting, gets really loud in there. So we lose on the road. It's our first, we had won our first 4 or 5 games. So, I'd seen Gary intense and everything, get upset, but we lose to West Virginia and we've got a charter flight. So we're flying right back after the game. And it's disappointing. I didn't play a whole lot, so I'm on a plane. I got my head down, my hood on, headphones on, and so do the other guys. And I just happen to look up, and there's Gary, leaning against the wall in the cabin of the plane, and he's just sitting there staring at us, like. And I'm looking around, like, guys have their heads down, like, what is he staring at? So I just put my head back down. 5, 10 minutes later, I lift my head back up, and he's still just staring at us, and it's like he's just got beams coming out of his eyes. So I tap a couple of guys next to him. I'm like, yo, look at coach. And he's like, lifts their head up and everything. And he just starts to go off. It doesn't matter enough to you guys. It should hurt you. It should hurt every time you lose. You just come in here and you put your heads down and put your headphones on. It should hurt you. And I was like, dude, the game just got over with a little while ago. Like, let's all decompress and let's come back to practice tomorrow. But like, it just got you inside to that mindset. But that was Gary. That was Gary, man. Like he lived and died with every loss, every win. Like he was just so urgent, man, in his approach.
Have you gotten used to seeing Maryland in the Big Ten?
Yes and no. I mean, it is odd, to look up and say, hey, who the Terps gonna play on Wednesday? Oh, they play Purdue. Like, well, that's odd. They used to play UVA. So it is odd. But being on this side, man, and knowing all of the business side of it and everything, I understand that part. But from a traditionalist standpoint, I always see Maryland as being an ACC team.
I'll get you out on this, and I always ask anyone who's a former player this question: who is the toughest guy? I don't care if it's high school or college or pros or whatever. Who's the toughest guy you ever played against?
Oh man, probably. I know from my position, it was Jason Kidd. When I was in high school, I was considered to be the number 2 or 3 point guard in our class. And you had always heard this guy, Jason Kidd, Jason Kidd. And it's not like it is now. Like social media, you could pull up videos quickly and everything. Back in the day, it was like, every, I think, Monday or Tuesday, USA Today would come out with the top 25. And, DeMatha was always in it. And then, they had our stats from that particular week. And Jason Kidd, his team, they were in the top 25. And I just remember, man, seeing like his stats every week. I mean, it was like video game numbers. It was 24 points, 13 assists, 11 steals, and you know, just crazy numbers. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this dude's 6'4". They say he's like 200 pounds. Like, there's no way he can be faster than me because he's just too big and everything. Well, fast forward, going to my senior year, we have they used to have what's called ABCD camp, and it was the top 100, 110 players in the country out in Indianapolis, and we just go at it. You go to class, you do some seminars, but in the afternoons and evenings, like you're playing against the best of the best. And I just remember being on the court with Jason Kidd for the first time, and man, he was faster than me. He was stronger than me. His vision was just off the charts. And I remember bringing the ball up the court. I never had a problem bringing the ball up the court against anybody, but I just remember his strength and his quickness. Like, he got a 10-second count on me one time. And I was just like, it made me go home. It's the first time I went back to my hotel room that night. I remember like it was yesterday. And I looked in the mirror. I was like, he's better than me. It was the first time that, like, as an opposing point guard, I looked at and said, he was better than me. Not even close. Like, it was like, he's better. He's special. So Jason Kidd's the first one that jumps out at me. But man, I played against some good ones. I played against Steve Nash. I played against Tim Duncan. I played against Stephon Marbury. Like, you go down the list. But Jason Kidd, he's a special one in my mind.
Hey, Coach, thank you for taking time out to talk to me today. I really appreciate it. And as a cat that went to Mason, I am really, really hoping for future success and looking forward to the upcoming season.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much for your support, man.
Hey, man, no problem. Thanks a lot, my man. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. No doubt.